for all your prayers and all your support. We did a lot of work, but we had a lot of fun, as you can see. And first, I just want to talk about what we did at the Mission of Hope. They started in 1997, and the reason why we showed a slide and we went to a voodoo village is because a lot of Haiti is voodoo influenced. And the way that Mission of Hope came about was this man and this woman, a recently married couple, went to Haiti, and their parents were missionaries, and they were visiting villages and visiting houses, and they saw this child who was about to die. And so they took the child and ran to the clinic, and the father of the child was like, man, they're gonna make it, you know. They had a lot of hope. They got to the clinic, and the clinic was closed, and they were running to the other clinic, and the clinic, by the time they got there, the child died. But when they found out what happened, the family had given all of their money to the voodoo priest. And because Buddhism was such an influence to them, the child ended up starving. And since that point, their hope and their dream was to say, we're going to win Haiti for Jesus. And from that moment on, they've been growing and growing. And it was amazing to see God's blessing upon Mission of Hope and how he was using it to do a lot of work and reaching a lot of people. And Grace is going to just talk about her experience.
Okay, so I'm really bad at public speaking. I get really nervous. So I'm just going to read straight through and not make eye contact. No, but this is an entry from a journal I wrote after I got back from Haiti. So this is pretty recently. Okay, so here I go. I just finished reading an amazing testimony about a 23-year-old woman named Katie who left everything behind in her hometown of Tennessee to follow God's plan for her in Uganda. She's the mother to 14 adopted young girls and has founded Amazima, an organization that provides education, food, medical care, and most importantly, the gospel of Christ. Those who read her story would think she is superwoman, but she claims she is just a normal girl in love with Christ. It's a perfect example of how God uses ordinary people to do extraordinary things. We hear that phrase often, but do we believe it with all of our hearts? That God can use sinful, selfish, broken me to do extraordinary things because he's an extraordinary God. And all I have to do is say yes, to be fully available to be used by God. God shows us that even though we are weak, we can do the impossible through him who gives us strength. We see this through Moses, a murderer who had a speech impediment, through Peter, who denied Christ, through David, who committed adultery and was a murderer. This gives me hope. I know God has always had a plan for me. I am not just an afterthought in his mind. I was beautifully and wonderfully made because I was made in the image of God. So I'm so glad I said yes to Haiti, and that because I was available, God was going to birth new passions in me. So Katie's story strikes a chord with me because of her unconditional love for abandoned children. I was most excited to go to Haiti to visit the orphanage, not realizing that it would be daily visits, sometimes twice a day, and not being prepared for how these children's stories of abandonment would break my heart. While in Haiti, there was a day when Eileen and I went up to the rooftop after a long day of painting so we could just journal and relax. It was gorgeous outside. You could see the rolling hills, the water, the sun setting, and there was a cool evening breeze, a perfect backdrop for a dramatic moment. I asked God then, why did you bring me here? I was weighing the different options, and I'm sure it wasn't to paint some houses, because anyone else could have done that, and probably a better job at that. But I felt something telling me to look down, and when I did, I saw the orphanage to my right and all the children outside, and it was without question, God was beginning to grow in me a desire to love his children. Being with those kids and loving them was why God sent me to Haiti. He has impressed this upon my heart, to love them the way he loves them, to see every one of his children as treasure. When I came back home from Haiti, I knew I had this passion that was stirring in my heart and spirit, but I didn't know where to start. It felt so big and new and overwhelming. So I'll do what I know I can do. I'll educate myself so I can be aware of what's going on outside of my little security bubble. I'll begin praying consistently for Angelique, for Julie, Julian, Jeremiah, Hannah, and Pierre, and those I didn't get to meet. I'll pray that I'll pray of growing that they know what unconditional love feels like, that they will be kind to those around them, that they will serve others, that they will fall deeply in love with the Lord, that they will grow up healthy and strong and be leaders in their community. So with that, I really want to challenge EM, while I challenge myself this year, to really be obedient to what God has instructed us to do. In the past, there have been several occasions where I asked God how I could be used to serve, and I still continue to do that today, but it's been in the Bible all along. God says to love our neighbors as ourselves, to give to those who are hungry something to eat, those who are thirsty something to drink, to clothe those who are without clothes, and look after the sick. These are not simply suggestions, He instructs us to do so, because whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me. Every person who claimed themselves Christian did all of this. The statistics for the number of needy children will be very different. The truth is that there are 143 million orphan children and 11 million who starve to death or die from preventable diseases, 8.5 million who work as child slaves, prostitutes, or other horrific conditions, 2.3 million who live with HIV, and if you get your math right, that adds up to 164.8 million needy children. And though at first glance that looks like a big number, there are 2.1 billion people on earth who claim themselves to be Christian. And the truth is that if only 8% of the Christians would care for one more child, there would not be any statistics left. So I'll end with James 1:27, which was up there earlier. Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this, to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. Thanks, guys.